Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Alicia Malone, who is a host on Turner Classic Movies and the host of TCM Imports, showcasing cinematic treasures from around the world. Malone is an authority on classic, independent, and foreign films and is passionate about supporting women in film. She has given two TEDx talks on the accomplishments and obstacles women have faced throughout cinema's history. Malone began her television career in her native Australia, working behind the scenes. Her expertise in film led to her transition as a host, interviewer, and film critic for television, radio, print, and online. She has appeared as a film expert on a variety of TV channels and programs, including CNN's The Movies documentary series, MSNBC, Access Hollywood, Entertainment Tonight, MTV, and ABC. And today we're discussing her wonderful new book, TCM Imports, Timeless Favorites and Hidden Gems of World Cinema. Alicia, welcome back. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's great to see you again. And if you're listening to this, you might hear some purrs. My cat's on my lap and she loves to purr right near the microphone. So that's a bit of ASMR for you. And if you're watching this, then you'll know that there's a cat right there and two dogs wandering around behind me. It's chaos.
I told Alicia before recording we took inspiration from Ask Eddie and Anne, his Eddie Muller's show, where you often see cats in the background.
Exactly.
But I correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember in previous interviews you've done that after your last book, Girls on Film, that you weren't going to write any more books. So
Yeah.
what changed your mind?
I should never say never, right? I was so determined after writing three books in fairly quick succession that I was done. I wasn't going to write any more nonfiction books. I've always wanted to write fiction, and I kept putting it off and writing fiction, nonfiction. And I thought, that's it, no more nonfiction books. But then I was approached by Sydney Sapala, who is an editor at Running Press, who works with TCM on the TCM library. And she said, why haven't you written a book for the TCM library? And I said, well, I didn't know you wanted me to write a book for the TCM library. But that had always been kind of a secret dream or something I had in the back of my mind as I interviewed authors on TCM who had written TCM library books of, wouldn't it be cool to have my name on an official TCM book? So I found it very hard to say no to her proposal, especially when she allowed me to pitch ideas. And something I really wanted to write was a book about international cinema. That was something I felt was missing from the TCM library. There are a couple of foreign films mentioned in the Essentials books, but none that is dedicated solely to foreign cinema. So I pitched that idea and she liked it. And I was like, here we go again.
Yeah. Here we go, and it's like I said at the top. I mean, it's a wonderful book. I mean, all the not just visually with all the stunning pictures, but you managed to write about all these movies, and anyone can read this whole book without having seen any of the films and still really enjoy what you wrote in terms of trivia and the politics behind some of the countries, which is very important in a film like Black Girl, for example. And so, I mean, I'd seen a lot of them, but there were some I haven't seen, which I'm sure will some I discovered from the book, which I'm sure we'll get.
Great.
But I heard you say that originally when you sat down and thought about what you wanted to include, your list was like 250
Yeah.
movies, and then you decided to focus to do it, to structure it in terms of seasons. What was it about that was helpful in narrowing down your choices?
Yeah, it was hard to figure out what the structure of this book would be because I knew I didn't want to write the greatest films of all time book. Plenty of those exist. I don't feel qualified to make that distinction. And yes, when I listed down all the films I would love to write about, it was a crazy list. And I knew I had to aim for around 50 films to be able to accomplish it within the timeline. Also, that feels more accessible than a 250 film book. So I was thinking about how am I going to structure this that could be a little bit different. And I thought about the way that I like to watch movies, and I really do like to watch them seasonally. It's also how we program the channel at TCM and including TCM Imports, is that we have the festive films around the holidays. We have the scary films at Halloween. I included the noir films for Noirvember because that's taken off now in November, and summer films in summer. And in doing so, it actually led to a much more eclectic list than it would have been if it had just been my favorite films, because I think each of us as film lovers, we tend to gravitate toward the same genres that we love, comedies or romantic comedies or dramas. And this forced me to widen my perspective and try a little bit harder to go outside the box. It also meant that I included a couple of films that I'd never seen. And my goal really was, as you touched on, is that even if you are a cinephile, there will be hopefully a film or two that you haven't seen. And if you've never seen any of these movies, then you're very welcome to join. I definitely wanted it to be accessible and not like I'm a gatekeeper and writing in an academic way that could be hard for people, make it even more daunting to watch these movies.
And I understand that there was was it only two films you hadn't seen before in this book, Spring in a Small Town,
Yes.
Parents Pickup. Those were the
Yeah,
two.
that's right. Those were the two. And so I asked a lot of my friends who are big cinephiles, including some of the TCM hosts, the programmer for TCM Imports, and one of my friends who lives around the corner from me here in Maine, who has seen about every film ever made. He's got a crazy DVD collection. And so I asked them, like, what are some films I'm missing that evoke seasons? And especially once I got down to realizing, oh, I don't have that many spring films, or I need another Christmas film. And I have a lot of summer because obviously films are mainly shot in summer because of the great weather. So I was trying to think about what else I could include. And those two were films that I discovered through recommendations from friends. And I was so glad that I did. Paris Pickup, I know people will probably be annoyed at me for including that one because it is very hard to find. It comes and goes in terms of rights. And I did want to make sure that the films were accessible to see, that they were available on streaming services. That one, though, is tricky, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, that one's hard to find. I really like that one, Christmas Noir. It reminded me of I listened to your interview with a mutual friend we have, Mike White, the projection booth, and he made, Blast of Silence is another like those
Yes,
are there
that's
there are a
right.
decent amount of them. But Spring in a Small Town, just the story behind that, like that there was this lost film in China for so many years, and once it was rediscovered, considered one of the greatest films made in China, and I really liked it. And at a certain point, I don't know if this stood out to you, but it resembled Postman Always Rings Twice, just a hair.
Mm.
When the wife at one point said, "Oh, if only my husband would just die," and then I thought, this is like Postman Always Rings Twice without them following their criminal instincts. I don't
Without
know.
the actual murder. I like that. I didn't even think of that. But that film was a big surprise to me. I thought, why aren't people talking about this film more? And as you said, it has now become what they say, one of the greatest Chinese films ever made. But it's just on YouTube. You can watch it there if you're interested. Very lyrical movie, very
Yeah.
poetic. I love the narration of the wife and follows all the emotions that she goes
Yes.
through. I love the metaphors of the crumbling house that they live in and their crumbling relationship, the return of the flame from her past, and yeah, keeping you guessing about how that's all going to play out. I mean, it's a beautifully made film, and it just makes you wonder, as we always do as cinephiles, how much have we lost? What
Mm,
great films have we lost through time and erosion of film and just the rights issues and things not going to DVD, or making it to streaming services. And that's another thing about this book. What I wanted to do was to just go slightly outside of the film canon, because I feel like when we talk about the greatest films of all time, we talk about just such a select few films, and it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, that everyone just says it's the greatest film, so then it is the greatest film, and you don't get to discover anything outside of that small selection of films.
mm. Well, it reminds me of what for in each chapter you have a quote from a critic, and one of them is one of my favorite critics, Jonathan Rosenbaum, and I've interviewed him a couple of times, and he said really we're all hicks when it comes to movies because there's no way we could have seen, there's no way we could have seen Well, I mean, that's the way he put it. I
Absolutely, yeah.
maybe put it that way, but he just thought there's so many movies. How can we really say we've seen, everything or
Exactly.
we're really quote unquote experts in a way?
I know, and that's why curation is so important. And
Yes. Yeah.
like books like this become helpful to people where you go, where do I begin? Especially
I,
these days when seemingly there's so much content out there, but it can be really hard to navigate that. You're like, where do I start? There's so much on Netflix and Amazon and Max and all of these streaming services. It can be difficult to know where to begin.
yeah.
So I really feel like curation is key, which of course is part of the whole philosophy of TCM.
Yeah, I completely agree because I heard, as you said, even though people like you or me are big film buffs, it can still be difficult to decide, oh, what am I going to
Yeah.
watch? Because you could put on the Criterion channel and, there's
Spend hours going through
yeah,
it.
endless options. And I'm fortunate with my show because I'm reading your book, so I'm gonna naturally watch some. Or if I'm reading Eddie Muller's noir book, then I'm watching noir. So my show
Yeah.
kind of dictates what I'm gonna watch. But it makes it easier for me. But what I've noticed, and I was curious your take on this. I've noticed that there is a lot more of people putting out lists these days, like Letterbox D or going on
Hmm.
carpet to ask what are your top four. And I know
Yeah.
they asked you and all the
Yeah. I
TCM
was like, I had to think of
recently.
it real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, Criterion asks people their favorites and that are part of the
Yes.
Criterion collection, or even the Criterion closet videos to an extent are like
Yeah,
lists.
absolutely. Yeah.
You notice that trend? And if so, why do you think there is such an initiative to get lists out there?
Yeah, I really like that happening, more lists from more perspectives, because it used to be the case where there was so few film reviewers and you could find a film reviewer that you trusted and thought, okay, if Lennon Moulton likes this movie, then I'll like this movie too, or Roger Ebert. But now I like that it is so open that many people can weigh in and give their opinion and come up with some interesting choices that you might not have thought about before. I love the Adventures in Moviegoing series on Criterion,
Yeah.
where they'll take, even an author or sometimes a filmmaker or an actor and ask them about the films that really shaped them. I love that podcast, Films to Be Buried With. And yeah, I think it's always interesting to hear from different people, especially how it influenced them. I was watching the Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg Criterion Closet video, and what I like about the closet videos, particularly lately, is with such a wide selection of people, you are getting insights that you never would have gotten before. Like Seth Rogen picked Cranes Are Flying, a Russian war film,
Hmm.
saying it inspired him and some of the look for the studio, his series on Apple. I never would have put those two together, but that's really interesting to hear about. Or I remember when Channing Tatum and Zoe Kravitz were in the closet, and I was like, wow, Channing Tatum's a cinephile. I didn't know that he watched such a wide selection, wide range of foreign films, and he doesn't get asked those questions normally in press junkets. So that's really interesting. So I think we always like to have a peek behind the curtain to hear people's choices and also get some ideas of what to watch, because it can be really difficult to find something that you want to watch. And the algorithms, I don't really enjoy the way algorithms will just tell you, if you liked this, here's more of the same. Because to me, always the joy in watching films is finding something that I might not have realized I would have liked, is outside of what I normally watch. And discovery is really exciting when you're a film lover.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. And each chapter is a little bit different. You may start on the talking about the filmmaker, you might talk about the politics, the industry. Was that intentional or did it organically come out that way?
That was intentional. I think it's hard when you're writing. Oh, here comes my cat Hayworth to cross frame, crossing frame. Um, Yeah, that was intentional. It's hard when you are writing a list book not to be repetitive. I didn't want every chapter to feel the same as each other, particularly when you have, a couple of films from Australia. I didn't want to talk about the same parts of Australian film history with every Australian movie. So I tried to really think about what's my in, with each film. Like, where will I start in the story? Will I start with the filmmaker, the country, what was happening at the time, and just vary it a bit so it would be interesting to read if people did want to read it cover to cover. Though I imagine most people will just have it on their coffee table and open it up when they want an idea of something to watch.
Well, that's also part of what's appealing about it is, I mean, obviously, I recommend people read the whole book as I did, but you can read it and then have it on your coffee table. A year goes by and then just flip through and pick something, or if you just read some of it, that's another thing. Like you're never lost.
Yeah.
Options or great information about each movie. Was there a similarity in the way you approach the writing in this book as you do on the TCM intros and outros?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, TCM intros and outros are obviously much shorter and I write them to be read. So they're written the way I would naturally speak versus writing them for someone to read. But I do approach them in the same way when I'm writing my intros. I'll look through all the research that I have on that particular movie and I'll just try to look for one particular thing that really sparks my interest. And I think, okay, that's it. That's the way in. And then I'll look for more and I'll think, okay, that would be working. That would work after the film, after people have seen it, or I want to make sure I hit these points in the intro. So I did really approach it the same way. And I do try to think of all of my intros and all of the entries in the book as having a beginning, middle, and end that makes sense, that flows with each other.
And maybe it's different for each film, but when you're going to write about a film, do you decide, okay, I need to watch this 3 times before I start writing it 2 times? I mean, do you have like a number of viewings you need before writing it, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, TCM wise, I just watch it once and I make notes of anything interesting that I need to mention. But of course, you don't want to give too much away about the film in the introduction, so I don't need to go into too much detail about the movie. I do like to note the ending because if someone dies at the end of a movie and I come back on screen, I'm like, hi, it's like, okay, got to match the tone of the end of the
Oh, I
movie,
get right. Yeah.
particularly with TCM imports, where sometimes they do end, badly.
Yeah.
Like they did, I had the Mikhail Haneke film, The Seventh Continent. I don't know
Oh,
if you've seen that one, but it ends in a murder suicide of a family. And so I, made sure I didn't come out smiling at the end of that film. But for this book, I had seen a lot of the films, like you said, apart from two before. I watched it again once, like intently, not taking notes or anything, just fully immersing myself in the film, no distractions, no phone, no computer, to really just let it wash over me again. And then I would have it on my TV here in the office and just sort of go through to certain parts if I wanted to remind myself of them as I was writing.
I see. I see. And jumping into a couple of the films you write about, because I love Ozu and Late Spring. I was so glad that you
Yes.
included Late Spring, and I saw it for the first time, I think just when COVID started, and I watched it again yesterday and had a good cry because man,
Oh,
it's so simple but so powerful and relatable. But I like
really?
that you talked about the like his various pillow shots and how people interpret them in different ways. I was curious, do you the vase is one that in that film people talk about a lot. Do you have your own interpretation about that shot or any other shot about why he may be using the
Yeah. Yeah, I love the pillow shots because they really are open to everyone's own interpretation. Ozu never explained what these actually meant, but for that scene where she's lying in bed with her father and you see the realization that she's actually going to have to go through with the wedding, that she has no choice but to get married and everything's about to change. To me, it was just like a symbol of symbol of being stuck in one place or just like a still object that she was looking at and almost feeling like I wish I could stay the same like this vase, which sounds silly, but I feel like it really grounded
yeah, I
that
can,
scene with cutting back and forth, like something that was still and not moving.
Mm,
contrasting with her sort of emotional turmoil, something that's beautiful but
right.
not changing. I don't know. That was kind of my interpretation of it, but I do love to hear from people as to how they interpret it, or some people just don't get it at all. But it's
Right.
definitely beautiful to watch. What did you think?
You know what? I kind of cheat. I didn't. I was stuck on that. I thought, what is a? Does it have something to do with like marriage, like a vase, like
Yeah. Or is
humming?
it like a woman? Like, I don't know. It's
Yeah, or
hard to
like
guess.
dread. Is she dreading it because the vase is reminding her of the wedding? But I just couldn't help but Google what does vase represent in like literature and or films, and one of the things that I found was that apparently it does sometimes represent like the changing of times of when things change.
Oh,
Oh, well, that's like exactly what she's going through is this inner and how afraid she is that her life is now going to be completely different and how scary that is. So that
yeah,
to
that
me,
makes
oh
sense.
yeah, that to me is it that resonated with me. But it again, it's ambiguous. I think what you're saying certainly is valid as well as a lot of people's.
So if you hear my cat in the background, I've got a puppy and she's attacking the cat.
Oh God,
But no, the cat's not being hurt, but she is just angry about it.
dogs.
Cats and dogs fighting like cats and dogs. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I was glad that you included something from, Australia, of course, where you're born. And I had never seen Picnic at Hanging Rock before.
Great. I want to hear all your thoughts.
I really, really liked it. I mean, it was almost like a horror film. I think some
Yeah.
people consider it a horror, but just the mystery of what I like that it didn't just feel like okay, well, who like a conventional who done it, like what happened to these women. I was so much more interested in how what happened to them than almost destroyed everybody else's life. Um,
Yes.
and so that it's just like life things are mysterious that we can never really know why things happen the way they do. And so whether that was some kind of evil force bringing them up and even when the guy his clock wasn't working, it was like this pending doom of coming up. I mean, I certainly want to see it again because I think it's something that you can go back to, and it keeps giving you more and more with each viewing.
Hmm.
Is there a way like do you is there something you see in that about what happened to these girls or
Yeah, I love that it's so ambiguous. And
yeah
like you said, there is this haunting feeling throughout the film that builds. The rock seems to emanate a noise. The soundtrack has this deep hum of the rock. Like you said, the magnetic forces seem to stop watches.
I
Um, it is almost like an alien part of the landscape. So there's definitely that reading of it that aliens come and abduct the girls. Um, I like that it's not explained because I think in so many films, particularly modern films, they spoon feed you everything and everything gets tied up in a nice bow at the end. And I know viewers at the time were frustrated with not getting the answer. And that's also true of the book itself, the original novel, that no answer is given at the end. You just don't know what happened to these girls. I feel like they died.
yeah.
They died in the sun, they got lost, they died, and no one could find the bodies. But I do love how it is a horror film. It's also sort of a coming of age movie. It's also a historical look at Australia and the impact of colonialism on Australia with the English characters, and you see how the English ways were forced on young Australians, like with the girls in their tight dresses, and they feel like they can't be their wild, untamed selves. They're trying to be forced into being ladies. It's also weirdly sensual at times. I love the pan flute. I mean, there's so much happening in the film, and I think it is constantly surprising to people who've never seen it and to people who have seen it. I mean, I always enjoy revisiting it again and um, seeing new things every time.
Yeah, it's certainly a film that offers that. Yeah, but like I said, I really, really liked it. And I was so, as you know, because I'm from Toronto, so I was so glad that you included Black Christmas.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was like, it's Canada,
yeah, yeah, I was like, yes, we're in
international.
it. Where in this
Exactly.
book. And because I love that film. I met the woman gets killed the first time with a bag over her head, Lynn
Oh
Griffith.
yeah.
She's a friend of mine, actually.
That's great.
And she jokes that, anytime she goes somewhere where people kind of think you look familiar, she just puts the bag over her head.
You're like, oh, of course.
They know where she is. But I thought you would appreciate. I don't know if you know this, but I interviewed her about the film, and then I thought I'm gonna go to the house and
Oh,
just
you
do a
did.
little video. So I went, and it's completely gated up now. It's like in a very high end area. There was like security cameras everywhere. I don't even think I was allowed to be on the street. It was like a private.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
think that was the case when they shot it, but apparently I'm not 100% if this is true, but it was gated up because so many people were going to the house to take pictures because of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. I would imagine that's the case. I would definitely go visit if I knew where it was
Yeah,
when I was in Toronto.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that movie. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's not just your classic slasher film. There are many other themes that it explores, including abortion,
yeah,
and it is quite progressive in the way it talks about women and having agency and wanting to forge their own lives and independence away from men. Yeah, there's so much happening. It's not just your simple sorority girls get picked off slasher movie. And
yeah,
it's Christmas time.
yeah. I love that. I love the contra the irony. The
And
irony.
you see the similarities, even though, Bob Clark said, John Carpenter did his own thing with Halloween. Um, there's definitely with the opening shots and the POV of the camera coming into the door reminds you very much of John Carpenter's work with Halloween.
Yeah, when you wrote that Bob Clark insisted that Carpenter didn't take anything from the film, I was a little surprised because I was like, he must have.
Yeah, he must have.
Yeah,
I think he
a little more
probably
than
did, but
inspired.
Bob Clark was being very generous by saying
Yeah,
that no, he did not take anything.
yeah, typical Canadian. We're always a little more
So
polite.
nice. Yeah.
So nice. I understand that you're hoping to do a novel down the road. Or is that something you're doing now,
Yeah.
or is that something you're thinking about?
That's something I'm starting to work on now. I mean, like I said, I've always wanted to write fiction, but I kept putting it off. I've I've mainly written nonfiction. I have written a little bit of fiction for myself, but I've never been published fiction wise. Um, but I do love speaking of murder, I love a cozy murder mystery, small town, amateur sleuth, that kind of thing. So I'm working on an idea right now, and yeah, I think it'll just be really fun to try and fun to stretch myself in new ways. Like, how do I do this? And I read a lot, so I'm excited to give it a go.
Great. Well, we look forward to that. And if people want to get the book, I always ask off authors where they suggest people go because I not everybody's crazy about going to Amazon these days.
Yeah.
Is it where would you suggest people go if they want to get a copy?
Yeah, I would say anywhere but Amazon. I don't use Amazon myself. I try to go to independent booksellers, and that's always an option. I often go into a bookstore itself and say, "Can you order a copy?" Because they will order any book that you want, and they'll just order one copy in for you if they don't have it. I know places like in LA, I know the book is already in like Book Soup. So if you can go to an independent bookseller, or even, Barnes and Noble these days, they need help.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, brick and mortar bookstore is where I would suggest just to support that. Make sure we still have bookstores in the
Yeah.
future.
Certainly. Absolutely. Well, again, the book is called TCM Imports, Timeless Favorites and Hidden Gems of World Cinema. Highly recommend picking it up. It's a great gift to give as well for any holiday because of the seasons as you could Christmas,
Yeah.
yeah, Easter pass if people birthdays, anything. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. So Alicia, thank you again for coming on and
Thank
you
you.
can come again sometime down the road.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be back with my fiction
Yes.
book. Thank you. No, I appreciate your time and thanks for supporting the book.
My pleasure. And thank you all very much for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation, or what I call a tip, by clicking the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose to. Of course, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movie logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. I would also really appreciate if you leave a comment, share the video, like the video. All of these things create traction onto my YouTube channel and really help share the video far and wide and the channel in general. So thank you so much for doing that, and I will see you all in the next one.